Corn is a native plant to the New World, and it unites all of the races.
Hi, my name is Misha Harp, and I'm a food historian.
My name is Clarissa Clifton, and I am a food historian also. And today we're at the Root House, and we are cooking in their outdoor kitchen on their beautiful wood-burning stove that's from the 1850s. One thing I do want to mention is because we are food historians, we try to cook with items that would have been used in the 1800s. Either the manufacturer was actually around in that period, or they're using methods to produce, like in this case, the cornmeal that would have been done in the 1800s, early 1900s. And we are using Carolina Plantation's cornmeal because they have the yellow and white. They do stone ground cornmeal, and it makes a huge difference in cooking and in the flavor. And Misha is going to start with hoe cakes today.
Yes. It's a really versatile, simple, quick bread that people back then would have relied on to feed themselves quickly and effectively with tools that they had on hand, like the back of a hoe. So to get started, I'm just going to open this package. There we go. So I'm going to pour out some cornmeal into my bowl. That should be good. I'm going to add a pinch of salt. Cornmeal takes quite a bit of salt, so that this way it can taste really well seasoned. I'm also going to add some cayenne pepper for a hint of spice. And then, of course, some rosemary. So back then, people would have had at least an herb garden, and they could go to this herb garden to find different herbs and spices to season their food. And so above me here, we have some herbs that are drying, including this rosemary that I picked a little bit earlier. Just chop some of it up. And this gets sprinkled in. This would have been a really simple and quick bread that people could have made when they are working in a field and they have, for example, a hoe with them. They could build a small fire, place their hoe over the fire, and make this quick bread to supplement their meal. Or in some cases, maybe this would have been their full meal. We're going to add just enough water so that the cornmeal comes together. This is only taking me about 5 minutes, so you can imagine how popular something like this would have been. So now that my mixture has come together, I'm going to check my lovely stovetop. So I have some salt pork that's crackling over the fire, and essentially it's rendering its fat. So that's one option, to add a little grease to the pan. We also have some lard, which of course would have been very common back then. So I'm going to place some lard here. So we're going to make sure our lard is applied evenly throughout the pan. And so now that we have our hot pan that's nice and greased, and we have our mixture, we can start placing some hoe cakes down. So with this type of oven, you want to be sensitive to how hot your food is getting, and also the general temperature of the pan to make sure you're cooking as expected. So in this case, with this wood-burning oven, I'm just going to place my skillet a little bit closer to the hottest part of the fire to make sure we get a nice fry going. During this time period, you also would have had a lot of the same utensils that we see today, like a spatula, but we would have had an extended handle. So this facilitates cooking over a really hot stovetop and also in the open hearth. So I'll give my cakes a little bit of time so that they can get nice and brown before I flip them. So now that I have my hoe cake started, I can also work on my greens. So this is about a bunch of mustard greens, and we're cooking these because around the winter time, people would have wanted to get as nutrient-dense foods as possible to take them through the winter when some of these nutrient-dense foods may not have been as available. So I just washed my greens that I picked from my garden, and now I'm going to place them behind me in a hot skillet with just a few red onions that I've already diced here. Take these. Also gonna sprinkle just a pinch of lard in my pan. So now I'm going to place my mustard greens into my hot skillet along with these onions. I'm gonna add just a pinch of salt. Should be good. And there really isn't a lot of fussing that needs to happen. As we continue to cook these down, essentially they will wilt, and then that's it. This is a lovely meal that people could have made if they're running low on salted meats. That's really nutrient dense, really quick to make, and of course comes straight from their garden or from a neighbor. Now that my hoe cakes have cooked on one side after a few minutes and they've gotten nice and brown, I can flip them to continue the cooking process, which should only take about a minute. And at that point, our hoe cakes will be ready to eat and our mustard greens will be ready soon. So here we are. Fresh wilted mustard greens and some hoe cakes. And just to finish off my mustard greens, I'm going to add just a touch of sweetness with some aged vinegar, which also would have been an accessible household item back then.
Now I'm going to make hot water cornbread. It's pretty much exactly like Misha's hot hoe cakes, except that I will add boiling water into the mix. And you have to remember we're talking about the 1800s, but we have an ingenious way to be able to heat up dishwater here. I'm actually going to use a cannonball. If you notice, I have an eye back here in the back that's kind of crooked because I have the chain hanging from it. So I'm going to lift it up. Hold on. Need to lift that up. And you bring out your cannonball, dust it off so you get rid of the ashes, and you drop it into the water. And as you can see, it's instant boiling water. And you cannot put your hand in the water immediately. And there we have hot dishwater again. Much easier and much hotter than what comes out of the modern day sink. I am going to use yellow cornmeal to do this one with. With the cornmeal, how much to add all depends on how many people you want to feed right now. So I'm probably going to put in about half of this bag of yellow cornmeal. And as you saw Misha do, I'm going to add a good bit of salt. This is not a pinch of salt like pinch. You need a good bit of salt to season. For me, I actually like rendering out fat from the salt pork, probably because I like to eat the salt pork too, because I like bacon a lot. And as you can hear, that starts sizzling as soon as I put it on. And as you notice behind me, we have a lot of dried peppers. So I actually pulled one down and it's got a good, decent amount of heat. So I'm gonna take probably about a quarter of it, dice it up some, and I'm actually gonna put it into my hot water cornbread just to give it a little bit of bite. If you don't like the bite, you don't have to add, of course, the hot peppers in it. I like the bite, especially since I am going to be using this with strawberry and fig preserves that I have here. So I like the heat and the sweet mixing together on the tongue. And I am going to add at least a cup. I'm probably going to do this entire 2-cup measuring cup here. Each indention is a 1/4 cup, which is a little bit of the common sense they had back in the day. As soon as you do the notches into the side of it, you can actually see it on the inside as well. Finish mixing this up, because very soon I should be able to put it in. And if you're wondering about the consistency we're trying to get this to, getting it a little bit to a pancake consistency so that we can just put it on there and it will just fry up. The consistency is amazing because you've already cooked the cornmeal with the boiling water. So the inside is kind of like velvety sauce, but it does a nice crisp outside when you're flipping it. And that's the thing you have to remember. The cornmeal is already cooked. You're just trying to crisp up the outside of it. For the longest time, if you visited someone and they served you cornbread, you were hot, because you expected them to spend money on the fact that you were visiting them. And when you think of it, it was quite a chore to visit anyone. One of the things that was expected in the South is that you were going to be fed. Dinner was lunch, the same as lunch today, but their dinner was noon and it was the big meal of the day. So if you were visiting whoever you were, you expected to at least have something to eat. People did not let you leave their house without offering you something to eat and drink. Because at this time there was not just a gas station or something down the road that you could stop by and get something to drink even. So you had to take care of your guests to make sure not only that they were comfortable in your house, but they had to be comfortable traveling back to their house. For the extra treat for Southerners everywhere, we are going to assemble a collard green sandwich. And so Misha's going to come up and we are going to assemble one real quick. And I know everybody is looking and saying, what's a collard green sandwich? I did a speech at UNC Chapel Hill, and there was a member of the Lumbee tribe who was there. And he mentioned that collard green sandwiches were the first thing to sell out at their powwows. And everybody in the audience sat up straight and were like, what? And my cousin Diane, who rode up there with me, she raised her hand. What is this collard green sandwich of which you speak? And he discussed it with us, and it makes sense. It makes complete sense. But when you first hear it, you're really expecting something elaborate to happen with this. But back here, I have collard greens cooking, and the collard green sandwich basically is, Misha's going to take one of her hoe cakes and just put it on the plate. And as you bring it over here, and we will put collard greens on top of that one, and whatever meat you cook them with, in this case we're going to use salt pork since that is what I had seasoned. So we use that to season hoe cakes and the hot water cornbread. You break that up on top. You can even use ham hock, salt pork, bacon, whatever. Got to have hot sauce on the collard green sandwich. And then you put another hoe cake on top. And there's your collard green sandwich. And it's delicious. It just makes sense that someone came up with it to be a one-handed meal. And the next thing we're going to do is Misha's going to take one of her hoe cakes also, and you could serve it because these are mustard greens that have a good peppery bite to them. And you can put that on the plate if you want it to also by itself. I also have strawberry and fig preserves that I actually made myself in the open hearth. And so you can just take a dollop of strawberry preserves and put them on top with my hot water cornbread, because there is a difference and the texture between the two, we'll actually put a dollop of figs on top. So this is actually a very quick meal, and it's a special meal also because of the fact that you're also allowing whoever to actually sample some of your preserves. But this is our completed dish with hot water cornbread, hoe cakes, and a collard green sandwich.
Again, I'm Misha Harp.
And I'm Clarissa Clifton, and thank you for being with us at the Root House. And as you can see, we're ready to eat now.